What I'm going to share with you today is my adventures with International Harvester Company as a career. And it's not exactly as exciting as Indiana Jones by any means, but it was almost that much adventure to it. I graduated from college in '68 and then got a job with International Harvester, and they made me a service center clerk in the IH Sales and Service in Hutchinson, Kansas. I was there about a year, and then I was moved to Enid, Oklahoma as a store accountant. Then I got a job, they moved me to Dallas, Texas. And I can tell you, the culture shock from coming from Lincoln, Kansas to get on Stemmons Freeway in Dallas is something to behold. I mean, the traffic was unbelievable. But I had a little route I'd run every day to work on South Lamar Street. I was in the distribution department in Dallas, and that was gathering up orders from the field. The reps would send in the orders. We would gather them up, put them in the best loads we knew how to do, and then routed the rail cars to certain stops and then notified the dealers to come pick up the stuff. Then we dealt with shortages and damage and things like that. Not a good job by any means for somebody that likes to be out and around. So a territory came open in Enid, Oklahoma, territory rep. And so I got to move back to Enid and take over a territory. The most significant dealer call I made was the first one. I was all full of fire and vinegar, and I ran to Stillwater, Oklahoma, 70, 80, 90 miles an hour. I was going to really do it. As time went on and the closer I got, the slower I drove, and the more I was thinking, this may not be quite as good as I thought it was going to be. So anyway, about the time I got there, I was doing 30 miles an hour. I found the dealership, but luckily it was a nice level-headed guy, and I had a good talk, and that was my first dealer call. And then I went back to Enid. About this time, they had us in travelogues all the time to make our calls, and all the company people had them assigned to them, and somebody somewhere decided that was too expensive because we put 40, 50, 60,000 miles on them and then turn them in, and they would sell them on the used lot at international truck sales. So then in 1975, we had to buy our own and furnish our own vehicles. About this time, this was in the time of Nixon's grain sale to Russia. And we went from like $1.50 or $2 a bushel to $5 almost overnight. And all the other crops were kind of the same way. So the problem was now we had such a demand, trying to fill that demand was almost impossible because dealers could literally sell everything they could get their hands on. The nature of being a rep is you go in and take all the heat of everything that went wrong with the dealer and the company. Well, now it has turned around. Instead of being chewed out by management because we didn't send enough orders in for the products, now we're getting chewed out by the dealers because we can't ship the product to them in the number and the time frame they need. So that was quite a change in life. I worked with the IHCC rep a lot, and we would inventory and collect for the sold items. Sometimes we'd have to go out in the country and collect a repo. That was always lots of fun. What the rep would do, he was pretty good at it. We would wait until we saw the guy left, the farm, and then we would run in and get a key and start it up and drive it off. So I have been at the repo depot too. Paperwork. A bureaucracy as big as International Harvester Company can produce mountains of paper. When I moved to Enid, I got a P.O. box so I could get letters and correspondence with the company. Well, it got so, all I got in the P.O. box was a call to the window. And when I went to the window, there would be a stack of manila envelopes that deep that I got to take home and read at my leisure. They announced programs and service bulletins and sales programs and price books and on and on and on. We're going to do this and do that. So anyway, the paperwork load got bigger and bigger. And then we finally got off the territory. We would work dealers for 4 days and spend 1 day at home just doing nothing but answering mail. But you can't believe how much mail they could send out. About this time, the Dealer XL program came into being because the company decided that dealers were selling everything they could get their hands on and making excellent profits. Let's get them to upgrade their dealerships. So we presented the XL program to them to build new facilities, remodel their existing facilities, and go with the computer systems, the SPAR and the SPIN, spare parts, automatic reorder, and spare parts inventory management. And that was the first go at trying to get the computer system tied to International Harvester and all the dealerships. We had some product problems we had to address. The 66 series tractor had wet sleeve engine, the 400 series engine. And previous to that, like the 361 that was in the 806 was a dry sleeve. So with the wet sleeve engine and the high speed, you had a vibration that set up in the sleeve, and the water kept hitting the sleeve like a woody woodpecker and trying to drill a hole in it. And then one day you woke up and you had extra oil in your crankcase, and it was antifreeze, it wasn't oil. So they came with the water filters and put some chemical in the filters to prevent that. The other thing was they were looking for other suppliers because the existing suppliers during this high demand period couldn't meet all their needs. And so they found somebody else who could cast the cage on the differential, except the material was too soft and it flaked away, and we had to change those back out to the original spec. I learned to put on product demonstrations. We had to have customer meetings at night, like the 241 round baler. And then about this time also, I went to the Tifton training school and learned how to set tillage equipment, not the way we wanted to, but the way the company wanted us to. Pro Ag line, 86 series. That showing what happens in a company when there's no communications or no relationship between the plants. And number 90 cotton harvester was tractor mounted, and a basket fit on top of the cab. Well, when they redesigned the cab from the 66 to the 86 series, nobody bothered to tell the Memphis plant to change the mounting on their cotton strippers. So we sent a bunch of cotton strippers to West Texas that we couldn't mount on tractors. And that was all because the man at the farm mall manager and the Memphis manager wouldn't talk to each other. So we had a massive program to clean that up. I've also found out I had several places where a big truck dealer took on the farm equipment. But the farm equipment business is so different from trucking. Truck is a level business almost all day long, because trucks are running up and down the road every day hauling. But farm equipment is based on yield, commodity prices, and the weather. And that's why you got this in the farm equipment business. And the truck dealers, as a rule, didn't like to deal with that. But so I would have to work hard in these dealerships and take the rep out to the field and call on customers and get some sales going. We went to Chicago. We were called in for a dealer meeting on the 86 to introduce the 86 series tractor. And when we went up there, flew up there, and then they bused us to downtown to one of these gigantic old-time hotels for where all the dealers and the company people were going to stay. So the bus unloads us, and we get off and we go in the lobby, and they ask your name and then hand you a room key. So we all walk in, all us Dallas guys, and we get our keys, and we go up to the room. I go up to the second floor. That's where my room was. It was pretty good. Opened the door, and good night. It was huge. The bathroom was bigger than the other guys' rooms. And so they went on up to 15th, 16th floor and got in their little closet rooms, I'd call them. And I said, well, since I'm on the second floor, you all come down and we'll go to the meeting together. And they had a big meal for us and presentation that night. And everybody came down, and then they walked in my room and said, good night. You ought to see I can't hardly turn around in my room. So we go to the meal that night, and the region manager is talking to somebody next to him. You ought to see this little bitty room they gave me. And being the honest and upright citizen that I am, I didn't tell him that I had his room. And the other guys were sitting around, one of you's going to make points with him, not telling, and the little lightning daggers come out of my eyes when I met them. They didn't dare tell. So there I was in that massive room. But that's what happens in big companies. Things get screwed up and it goes upside down. I'll never forget Bob Freeman. Boy, you'll see that little room. I can't even turn around in there. The next day, we went to McCormick Place, and Brooks McCormick himself was the featured speaker. And at that time, he announced that he was having to change the direction of Harvester, and he wanted to be a marketing-oriented company. In other words, he wants us to go out and see what the trend is and what the future needs are going to be, rather than, as before, we basically reacted to what the competition was doing or what the customer demand was. And we were supposed to go out and try to anticipate demand and for product development. And that's the reason. Then I got put in the marketing department, and my set of equipment was like loaders, miscellaneous planters, tillage equipment, things like that. And I had to forecast sales so that the plant knew what materials to buy to make a production run that year. During this time, when I was in marketing, I noticed a lot of dealers were calling in about, well, if I order this, what does this do? And it's in the price book, but I don't know what it does. Do I need it? Do I not need it? And so I found out that you had to go to about 3 different places to figure out what they're talking about. And so I made a sales guide where I consolidated, if you order this catalog in the price book, here's a picture of what you're going to get, and this is a description of what it's supposed to do for your planter or whatever it was at the time. And that helped a lot, and it cut down a lot of the calls into the region, because they had one book they could find everything rather than going to the sales catalog and the parts book and some service book somewhere, an operator's manual. I found out when I called on dealers, as you get older, you find out what works and what doesn't work. And what worked was if you were dealer friendly and it could cut through the bureaucracy to get something done for the dealer, then he was very susceptible to take some of your programs and your products that he didn't necessarily want. And that's how I got through some of that. Also learned some things about steel and castings. When I was in distribution one day, a sales rep called from West Texas. There's a trucker that just delivered a load of tractors to my dealer, and he said, oh my gosh, you guys are going to have a disaster. Well, what do you mean a disaster? They got engine blocks sitting out in the snow at the Melrose Park plant. So, well, that can't be good for them. They get rained on and the sun heats them up and they freeze in the cold. So we went to the service manager and he called somebody in Chicago and they said, hello, do you know anything about curing engine blocks before you bore them? They would keep these engine blocks out there for 2 or 3 years sometimes, and the casting would take a set. Then you could bore it, but if you did it prematurely, before it was ready, it'll come out a line bore, and you got a disaster in your engine. Like the one guy said, I called in with a warranty claim. Well, what's the matter? Well, the starter fell off. Why'd the starter fall off? Because the rod came through the block and knocked it off. Another thing I found was when working with row crop cultivators, we had these short liners that were just eating our lunch and selling them out by the bushel out in West Texas. So I made a trip out there, and what is going on? Well, yours is too expensive. Why is it too expensive? I don't know. You just charge too much. So I went to the field, and I found out the short liner had 3 shanks per row, where International would only sell 5 shanks per row. So I got with the marketing people in Chicago, and they offered the row crop cultivator with 3 shanks and took all that money out of it so that we could get in the market a little better. Then I got the cream job one day. Doug Parker, who was also in marketing, was in charge of plant tours. And so Doug decides he's going to go in a dealership, so he quits. Well, they look around the office. Hey, Rhudy ain't doing much over there. Let's go tap him. So I got to be the plant tour guide. And we had 5 airplanes chartered, Oklahoma City, Amarillo, Lubbock, Houston, and Dallas, I believe. Anyway, we were working with a travel agency at the other end in Moline. And so as a plane would come in and unload the passengers, they'd load up on buses, take them to a plant tour, and then take them to a dinner that evening, and probably the plant manager or one of his guys would make a speech to them and thank them for coming and supporting the product line. Well, you thought I got to do all that, right? You're wrong. Dick Brown, my boss, said, here's the keys to this. We rented this station wagon. Okay, what am I supposed to do? Just drive around town and look for cowboy hats. When you see them, you encourage them to get in your station wagon and take them to the hotel. And so we did. And lo and behold, we would drive around town, cowboy hats, walking unsteadily is the way to put it. And so we would load them up and take them back to the hotel so they could get better organized, I think. The other thing they learned about was plant bars. Here's this big factory with thousands of workers. Across the railroad tracks is a line of bars. And you were segregated depending on which department you worked in. But you didn't go to this one, you go to this one bar, you didn't go to the other one. So we stopped, we had to run through them, because every once in a while there'd be some cowboy hats who wandered into this bar where they were not welcome. And they'd put them back, and they'd go back and sit in a corner, a real dark, deep corner, so nobody'd notice them. And so we'd go in the bar and escort them out. And then without fail, every time we did that, they were going, my Lord, I was never so glad to see anybody in my life. I knew we weren't going to make it out there alive. That's just the way they do up there. We also put on shows like Southwest Farm Show in Fort Worth, Texas, the Livestock Show, and tractor pulls. I went to a farm show in Tulare, California. And, you know, most of these shows, John Deere International, Alice Chalmers, Case, whoever, were the big dogs in all these shows. Well, at Tulare, these big dogs were the little guys, because all the machinery was very specialized for fruit and vegetable farming, not big, wide open spaces like wheat and corn and beans like we're used to in the Midwest and the Southwest. And so that was quite an experience looking at all. I don't even know what some of those things did. January 1979, I got to spend the entire month in Phoenix, Arizona, introducing the 2+2 tractor. And wouldn't you know it, that's the year it rained every single day. And we were out in the mud, the blood, and the beer, getting these lots ready, getting the machinery ready, hooked up. They had a presentation for us in Dick Van Dyke's studio and had a tractor, and then they went around and showed us how we're supposed to sell this tractor. It was basically a 1086. Rear half was 1086, and the front half had a Kimco built front axle. And so we set off demonstration plots and different machines hooked to them So when the dealers came in to see the tractor, we could give them a good rundown on how to operate it and what you're supposed to do with it. One of the better jobs I ever had was with marketing planning. This was this was still in '79. International Harvester had rented the Superdome in New Orleans, and in it they had parked a huge amount of machinery, mostly industrial machinery, and they were bringing in worldwide distributors to show the machines to them. And I'll never forget this. They had this huge 580 payloader. It was about 2,000 horsepower engine, I think. Had an 11-yard bucket on it. And they filled the bucket halfway with sand and then drove a Scout in on top of the sand. And then at the back, behind the Scout, they had a yucca tree, and in front of the Scout, they had a cactus, and that was a display. And it was very rugged duty. 2 hours a day, we had to stand there with this machinery and serve champagne as these people came by to look at the machines. I never had an assignment like that again. Then we had Red Power Showdown on the 86 series, and we were touting the 86 series a lot and trying to beef our sales up, so each region would have a Red Power Showdown where they would rent a farm, and then we would hook all kinds of machinery to all these tractors and bring in the dealers. During this shortage time, what happened in these big companies, and that happens in all of them, it's happening today. We signed up a big car dealer to be a tractor dealer, and they thought that was good business. Well, what happens during a shortage is you divert your product to support this newly found dealer. Well, when you do that, guess what? You have to take away from the existing dealer that supported you all them years. So that, and then, not only that, but when the good times are over and we had to go back to hard selling, guess who was the first guy that canceled his contract? The guy that got the goodies, right? So that's pretty much it. And that's what happened deep in the bowels of the company at the time. Good, bad, or ugly. It was an adventure, though. I had 10 addresses in 12 years. So, like Indiana Jones, you're all over the world doing something.